Hello, my name is Austin Habish, the founder of Think Catholic, and you're listening to the Summa podcast, where we study St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae in a way simple and insightful for anyone to understand. The Summa podcast is brought to you by Think Catholic. Taking 2 questions of the Summa a day, we'll seek to summarize St. Thomas's responses, discovering the brilliance of Aquinas, and his Catholic faith is day 167. So let's get started. We're covering today questions 98 and 99 of the Secundae, that is, of perjury and of sacrilege. The translation that I always use in these podcasts is the one generously provided to me by Ave Maria Press, the 5-volume set translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican province, which you can now get at a discounted price from Ave Maria Press's site by typing in the code SUMMA10. And so here we go. Article 1, whether it is necessary for perjury that the statement confirmed on oath be false. Beginning with what is perjury, St. Thomas tells us that perjury is defined as a falsehood confirmed by oath. Therefore, based on the definition of perjury, it is requisite that, as we have said, under oath, a statement be uttered which is false. Article 2, whether all perjury is sinful. If a man swears on the Gospels or invokes God as his witness or anything like this, swearing that he will tell the truth, and then what he says is not true, this will clearly be sinful, not only because it is contrary to the explicit command of God, who commanded us in the 10 Commandments not to bear false witness, but by swearing it also pertains to irreverence to God, which is why this topic, perjury, has come under our broader treatment of irreligion. In brief, by St. Thomas, to swear is to call God as witness. Now it is an irreverence to God to call him to witness to a falsehood, because by doing so one implies either that God ignores the truth or that he is willing to bear witness to a falsehood. Therefore, perjury is manifestly a sin opposed to religion, to which it belongs to show reverence to God. Article 3, whether all perjury is a mortal sin. The general rule which St. Thomas gives us here is that any action that of its nature implies contempt of God is a mortal sin. This would include breaking any of the 10 Commandments, or even conducting acts of lesser malice in themselves, but made deadly by the contempt implied. As Jesus taught in the Gospel of Matthew, I say to you that whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, shall be liable to the hell of fire. The act of perjury by being directly against the 8th commandment, therefore, in response to our article, is mortally sinful. Article 4, whether he sins who demands an oath of a perjurer. If a man seeking to motivate his interlocutor speak truthfully, and there is a kind of urgent need that this information be received honestly, then it is not sinful to demand the other to swear that they are telling the truth, even if they have a history of lying. But one should not ask another to swear needlessly, for this would pertain to irreverence of God, as our Lord taught. Then let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Also, if a man, based on his office or the juridical proceedings or something like this, must ask another to swear what they are about to say is true, then there is not sin in this either, even if it is probable that the perjurer will lie again. St. Thomas writes, if a man demands an oath as a public person, in accordance with the requirements of the law, he does not seem to be at fault if he demands an oath of a person, whether he knows that he will swear falsely or truly, because seemingly it is not that he exacts the oath, but the person at whose instance he demands it. Now we turn to question 99 on sacrilege. Article 1, whether sacrilege is the violation of a sacred thing. According to St. Thomas, we take the word sacrilege from 2 Latin words, sacrum, so the sacred, and legere, which normally we translate to read, but could also mean to gather or choose. In other words, sacrilege etymologically means to take of what is sacred. Then in general, St. Thomas defines sacrilege in the following way. Whatever pertains to irreverence for sacred things is an injury to God and comes under the head of sacrilege. Article 2, whether sacrilege is a special sin. Is sacrilege a unique sin under the general category of irreligion? And since it is explained briefly by Aquinas, we will simply quote him. He writes, wherever we find a special aspect of deformity, there must needs be a special sin, because the species of a thing is derived chiefly from its formal aspect and not from its matter or subject. Now in sacrilege we find a special aspect of deformity, namely the violation of a sacred thing by treating it irreverently. Hence, it is a special sin. So materially, sacrilege is an act of irreverence against God. It is an act of irreligion, but it is further specified in being an act of irreverence against God through the mistreatment of sacred things, which in a way represent or share in God's majesty, making sacrilege unique and dissimilar to acts like perjury or simony, which we will see later. Article 3, whether the species of sacrilege are distinguished according to the sacred things. Beginning with a sentence from St. Thomas, which we can then explain, acts and habits are distinguished by their objects. Now, the sacred thing is the object of sacrilege. Therefore, the species of sacrilege are distinguished according to the sacred things. So sacrilege is irreverence towards sacred things. Thus, if we find an essential distinction among those sacred things, then we will have a differences in species among kinds of sacrilege as well. And among sacred things, we have first people, then places, then sacred things or items. People such as priests, bishops, places like cathedrals, the Holy Sepulchre, then things like the sacraments, vestments, chalices, and such. And as we have three different kinds of sacred things, so too in response to our article, we have three different kinds or species of sacrilege. Article 4, whether the punishment of sacrilege should be pecuniary. St. Thomas mentions here that the state, at least in his day, punished the crime of sacrilege by the death penalty, which is noteworthy. I assume this would be for especially grievous acts of sacrilege, such as desecrating the Eucharist. Then when it comes to the question of whether the church should punish a sacrileger by imposing a fine, Aquinas argues here that the just punishment for abusing sacred things, i.e. by committing sacrilege, is to be deprived of those sacred things via excommunication. However, seeing how the person who commits sacrilege likely doesn't care much for their own soul or being excommunicated to begin with, it is fitting that the church also impose a financial fine as well to teach him a lesson, as the saying goes. Since if there is one thing that carnal men do care about, it is money. Giving the last word in our episode to St. Thomas, he writes, now it would seem that the sacrilegious man who reverences not sacred things is not sufficiently deterred from sinning by sacred things being withheld from him, since he has no care for them. Wherefore, according to human laws, he is sentenced to capital punishment, and according to the statutes of the church, which does not inflict the death of the body, a pecuniary or monetary punishment is inflicted in order that men may be deterred from sacrilege, at least by temporal punishments. Which brings us to the close of another episode. We have just finished covering questions 98 and 99 of the Secunda Secundae, that is, of perjury and of sacrilege. My name is Austin Habish with Think Catholic, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.